They said I was too old for her, that she was too bright, too beautiful, too fast. Maybe they were right. But I didn't feel old when I was around Madeline. I felt seen. After 30 years in medicine, and 15 of those as a family physician in a small town where everyone knows your schedule better than your receptionist does, I wasn't used to surprises. But Madeline Cross was a surprise. I met her when I began treating her father, Henry Cross. He was a retired literature professor with advanced diabetes and brittle pride. I visited him weekly for in-home care, since he refused to be shuffled into a clinic like a number. Madeline was his only child. She had just moved back to town after years in the city, taking a break from her marketing career. At least, that's what she said. I'd later learned taking a break was her code for burned every bridge I had. She was striking, not just her looks, though she had the kind of composure and smile that made people lean in, but her presence. She remembered small things. Asked about my mother's garden after I'd casually mentioned it once. Noticed if I'd shaved. That kind of attention can feel like sunlight when you're not used to it. We started having tea after Henry's appointments. She'd ask about stress, balance, life as a doctor. At first, I assumed she was bored. Then I assumed she was flirting. Then, over time, I stopped assuming anything and just let myself be present. 6 months after Henry passed, peacefully, with his hand in hers and mine on his shoulder, we went on our first official date. A year later, we were married. Some called it quick. Some whispered about the age gap. But she said she loved how steady I was. "You're not like the others," she told me one evening on the porch, sipping wine. "You don't play games. You build things." And I believed her. I helped her launch her wellness brand, Crosswell Vitality. Clean, minimal branding, wellness coaching, women's health consulting. She said it was her dream. I leased her a building near my practice, helped with permits, even connected her to some of my more influential patients. I believed in her. When she said she needed training, I paid for certifications. When she said she wanted a studio space, I helped design it. When she asked for independence, I gave her everything she needed to run solo. But in the year that followed, she began to shift. It started with small things. Fewer dinners at home, more late nights, organizing client sessions. She started working with a yoga instructor named Sean Rivers, someone she claimed was amazing for the brand. Young, lean, with a perfectly trimmed beard and a voice that could lull a politician into a nap. He was always just dropping off mats or helping adjust lighting. I didn't ask questions. I trusted her. Foolishly, my staff started noticing first. My nurse, Dana, told me, "You know she and that yoga guy are always the last ones out of that building, right?" I smiled, tried to brush it off, but the knot in my chest didn't. Then came the whispers. A patient mentioned seeing Madeline and Sean at a winery 2 hours out of town. "Didn't know she had a brother," she joked. When I asked Madeline about it, she blinked and said, "Oh, it was a wellness retreat thing. You wouldn't understand. It's very new age." And I let it go. Because the alternative, believing I'd invested my love, my time, and my name into someone who saw me as a stepping stone, was too bitter to swallow without proof. But proof came. It arrived in the form of a letter. A formal one. On the letterhead of a lawyer I vaguely knew from town. It accused me of inappropriate and sustained emotional coercion toward my wife. It claimed I'd used my position as a doctor to manipulate and control a much younger partner, and that Madeline had endured years of subtle psychological abuse under the guise of support. It hit me like a punch to the sternum. It was a setup, a clean exit for her, a way to poison the well before she left. Not just me, but the business, the town, and her name tied to mine. She wanted sympathy, wanted to claim I had power over her, that she was finally liberating herself. I sat in my study, staring at the letter, wondering how someone could lie so elegantly, so strategically. But what she didn't know was that I had already begun documenting things. Not because I distrusted her, but because I'm a physician, trained to take notes, to protect myself, to verify everything. I had receipts. I had emails. I had text messages where she praised me, called me her rock, thanked me for helping her find her path. And I had one more thing. A voice recording. 3 weeks earlier, I had walked into her clinic while she was in session with Sean. I hadn't meant to spy. I was delivering mail. But I heard my name, and I froze. I recorded everything from the hallway. "He's harmless," Madeline had said, laughing. "Old-fashioned. Reliable. But I can't keep pretending I'm fulfilled. Once this is over, I need a clean break. One that makes sense to the public. You mean legal protection? Sean asked. No, more like a narrative. I've been stifled. That I finally found the strength to be who I really am. She giggled. He agreed. It was all theater. And I was the stage. I saved the file. I didn't tell anyone. I waited. Because if she was going to make a move, I wanted her to walk right into the light with her hands full of lies. And now she had. She had accused me, put it in writing, sent it to legal, and that meant she opened the door for evidence. I didn't respond immediately. The letter from her attorney gave me 10 business days to reply, and I used every one of them. Not to stall, to prepare, to do what I'd always done best: document, verify, and move quietly. First, I contacted my own lawyer, someone who had once helped me with a malpractice insurance audit. Practical man, dry as toast. Exactly the kind of person I needed. She's accusing you of coercion, he said, flipping through the pages. Emotional manipulation, power imbalance, and inappropriate influence due to your profession. I raised an eyebrow. For giving her a business? For paying for her certifications? She's spinning it as you leveraging money and status to keep her dependent, he replied. Not an uncommon angle these days. She's preparing to leave and trying to take control of the story before you can. Can she win with this? He leaned back. That depends. Do you have anything that proves otherwise? I opened my laptop and slid over a labeled folder. Emails, messages, receipts, screenshots, and finally, the recording. He listened in silence, then let out a low whistle. She actually says she needs to fabricate a narrative? She does. Word for word. He smiled without warmth. Then you're not just defending yourself. You're about to dismantle her entire plan. We didn't threaten her. We didn't fire back with accusations. Instead, my lawyer responded with a simple letter requesting a formal deposition and providing selected evidence that contradicted her claims. Enough to raise alarm, but not enough to show our full hand. Let them wonder how much we really had. That's when Madeline reached out directly. It came late one night. A text, then a call. I didn't answer. She tried again the next morning. This time, she left a voicemail. Sam, I didn't mean for it to go like this. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like you expected too much of me. I never wanted to hurt you, but I had to do what's right for me. I hope someday you understand. It was the voice of someone who still believed they were the victim in a play they wrote themselves. I didn't respond. Instead, I moved forward, formally. We filed our own counterstatement with a signed affidavit, attaching her recorded conversation and a detailed timeline of all support I had provided for her wellness brand, with signed agreements, bank transfers, and receipts. We submitted screenshots of her praise, text messages thanking me for giving her the freedom to finally live a full life, and promotional materials she had publicly posted describing me as the best thing that ever happened to her. But the real blow came when I notified the Professional Regulatory Board. As a licensed wellness consultant, even in a non-medical capacity, Madeline was subject to state ethical review, especially when using public claims about manipulation and coercion in advertising. Her narrative wasn't just slander. It was potentially a violation of truth in advertising laws and misrepresentation of medical relationships. And once the board started investigating, things fell apart fast. Her lawyer dropped her within a week of receiving our files. The legal term was irreconcilable professional conflict. Translation: you didn't tell us you were recorded planning this. She tried to pivot online. On her wellness brand's Instagram, she posted a now-deleted story. When strong women speak up, people always try to silence them. But I will never stop using my voice. But the comments turned against her almost instantly. Didn't you literally say on tape that you were making it up? You faked abuse to build your business? You're disgusting. I used to follow you for wellness tips. Unfollowed forever. She shut down her pages within 48 hours. Sean Rivers, the yogi influencer turned sidekick, tried to distance himself publicly. Posted a video from a park, shirt half unbuttoned, talking about misaligned energies and how he had been misled by someone he trusted. He lasted 1 week after that. His studio lease was terminated. Multiple clients pulled testimonials they'd recorded, and a former assistant of his published screenshots of texts that suggested he was fully aware of the smear campaign Madeline planned. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't grant interviews. Didn't post anything. I kept working. Patients still came. My schedule stayed full. The town that once whispered about the age difference suddenly began treating me like something else entirely. Not a man who'd been fooled, but a man who'd survived something dark with his name intact. And then came the formal apology. It arrived by courier, a signed letter from Madeline, drafted by her new attorney. Full retraction of all prior claims. A commitment not to speak publicly about our relationship again. No financial demands. No property claims. She included one personal paragraph at the bottom, handwritten. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was selfish. I was scared of being ordinary, and I used your reputation to build something I hadn't earned. I'm sorry. I folded it once and put it in the drawer. Didn't frame it. Didn't rip it up either. Some things don't need an ending. Just distance. A month later, she left town. Sean too. The clinic space she once decorated with plants, crystals, and empowerment quotes was leased out to a local dentist. He painted over the walls, tore out the yoga mats, and put in proper lighting. I walked past it one day on my way to lunch and felt absolutely nothing. She came into my life through the door of care and trust, and left through the window of deceit. But I walked out the front door. With my name, my license, my life, still mine. The hardest part wasn't proving I was innocent. It was realizing how close I'd come to losing everything because I trusted someone who smiled while setting the fuse. After Madeline left town, things didn't go back to normal. Not exactly. You don't return to normal after your reputation is dragged to the edge and nearly pushed off the cliff. But I did return to what mattered: my work, my patience, and the quiet satisfaction of waking up without having to wonder if someone under your roof is plotting against you. People in town were kind, more than I expected. The same neighbors who once raised eyebrows over our age difference now greeted me with knowing nods, warm words, or a gentle clap on the shoulder. Even Dana, my head nurse, never one for sentiment, left a small note on my desk one morning that read, "You always said you believed in evidence. You just reminded the rest of us why that matters." I kept my head down. I didn't gloat, but I did begin to understand how betrayal changes you. Not just the anger, but the way you see people. How charm can be weaponized. How good intentions can be turned into traps. And how silence, when used right, becomes a scalpel. The local paper tried to get a quote from me. A columnist wanted to do a piece titled "The Doctor Who Took the High Road." I declined. I'm not interested in being a symbol, I told her. I just want to do my job. Still, stories have a way of spreading. And mine had legs. About 3 months after everything settled, I was asked to speak at a professional ethics panel for rural physicians. The invite came from a colleague at the state board, someone who'd reviewed Madeline's case. I was reluctant at first. I'm not a public speaker, I told him. You don't have to be, he replied. You just have to be honest. So I went. It was a small venue, a hotel conference room with plastic tablecloths and weak coffee. But the room was packed. Doctors, therapists, nurse practitioners. All there to talk about boundaries, accusations, and self-protection in a world where perception can destroy years of careful work. When it was my turn to speak, I stood behind the podium and took a long breath. I've spent 3 decades helping people heal, I said. But nothing taught me more about the importance of documentation, transparency, and boundaries than being accused by someone I once trusted more than anyone. No drama, no names, just facts. I told them how quickly a reputation can be turned against you, how dangerous it is to assume that good intentions are enough, how essential it is, especially for professionals, to protect both themselves and their relationships with clarity and record-keeping. And afterward, they lined up to speak to me, not about medical charts, about betrayal. One woman, a physician's assistant from another county, said, "My ex tried something similar," said I manipulated him into supporting my career. The only thing that saved me was a thread of texts I hadn't deleted. Another, a male therapist, shook my hand and said, "Thank you. Most of us don't talk about what happens when we're the ones being lied about." I drove home that night feeling tired, but lighter. Not proud, not vindicated, just intact. But not everyone had forgotten Madeline. A few weeks later, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You're not the only one." It was from a woman named Elise Harper. She introduced herself as a former colleague of Madeline's back when she worked in marketing before moving back to town. Her message was short, but pointed. I saw the articles, the video. I wasn't surprised. She did the same thing to my business partner years ago. Got close. Got access. Spread a false story when it served her. You're the only one I've seen stand up and make it stick. Attached was a scanned letter from Elise's former attorney, settled out of court, gag order included. But the similarities were chilling. Same charm, same language, same fake narrative of being controlled. I replied, thanking her for the courage to reach out. We spoke once on the phone. She wasn't bitter, just tired, and grateful someone had finally pulled the curtain. It hit me then that this wasn't just my story. It was a pattern, one that only ended when someone refused to play the quiet, shamed role they were cast in. And maybe that's why Madeline had tried so hard to paint me as oppressive. Because if I didn't speak, her story became reality. But if I did, calmly, with proof, she lost control. And someone like her lives for control. Months passed. My practice grew. I took on a second nurse. I started mentoring a younger doctor who reminded me of myself 20 years ago. Cautious, quiet, eager to help. One evening, after hours, we sat reviewing cases and sipping weak breakroom coffee. He looked up and asked, "Can I ask something personal?" "Sure," I said. "You regret marrying her?" I paused. "I regret trusting someone who saw me as useful instead of human," I said. "But I don't regret learning what I did. I'll never let anyone shape my name for me again." He nodded slowly. "Also," I added, cracking a dry smile, "get everything in writing." He laughed. "But I meant it. Trust is a beautiful thing. But truth, recorded and verified, is stronger." And in the end, it wasn't love or rage that saved me. It was the quiet discipline of a man who knew that sometimes the best way to protect your future is to prepare for someone else's lie. It was strange how quickly Madeline disappeared from public view. One moment she was promoting retreats, writing blog posts about empowerment and healing through movement, tagging local sponsors, and getting invited to wellness panels. The next, her entire online presence vanished like smoke. Websites gone, pages locked, content scrubbed. But the part that stayed was the silence. No one defended her. Not publicly. Not even Sean Rivers. He resurfaced briefly 6 weeks after the fallout, this time under a rebranded identity. Sean Eli, spiritual lifestyle mentor. His new website offered online breathwork sessions and vague promises of emotional alignment. He posted a YouTube video that lasted exactly 9 minutes. In it, he wore all white and spoke softly to the camera. "I made mistakes," he said, "but I was also caught in someone else's pain. I believed in a story that wasn't mine to tell. I've stepped away to reflect." The comments weren't kind. "You helped her lie and destroy a good man. Still trying to monetize it, huh? Delete your channel. You're done." He took the video down within 24 hours. But I didn't follow it. I didn't need to. I had already moved on to more meaningful things. One of my patients, a widow named Mrs. Leary, had been struggling to manage her insulin schedule after her daughter moved away. I began visiting her once a week again, not because I had to, but because it grounded me. Her house smelled like lavender and old books, and she always made too much tea. We never talked about what happened. She just called me Dr. Sam and told me I looked healthier. Maybe I did. There's something powerful about surviving the kind of betrayal that was meant to define you. Because I chose not to hide. That was the thing. Madeline didn't just lie. She counted on my silence. She wanted me to be too ashamed to speak, too dignified to fight, too professional to defend myself. But what she didn't understand was that quiet isn't weakness. It's focus. A year after the scandal, I was invited to speak again, this time at a medical ethics conference in Denver. Bigger stage, bigger audience. I almost declined. But then I got a message from Elise Harper again. She had seen my name on the list of speakers and wrote, "Still standing. Proud of you. Not just for surviving, for showing others how." So I accepted. When I took the stage, I didn't speak like a victim. I spoke like a man who had been tested. "I've learned," I said, "that it's not enough to live with integrity. You have to protect it. Because there will always be someone who sees your kindness as opportunity, your support as leverage, and your silence as permission." There were nods across the room. Not just from doctors, but administrators, nurses, counselors. People who knew the tightrope between trust and exposure. After the speech, a young psychiatrist approached me. "She said all the right things, didn't she?" he asked. "She said exactly what I needed to hear," I replied. "And none of it was true." "Same thing happened to me," he admitted. "Different context. Same betrayal." We talked for 20 minutes. It reminded me why I chose medicine in the first place, not just for the science, but for the people who needed steady hands when everything around them broke. Back home, I made changes to the clinic. We updated our intake systems. I began holding quarterly workshops on professional boundaries and documentation for local providers. Not because I was paranoid, but because I'd lived through what happened when you aren't prepared. And then, one spring afternoon, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A postcard. No return address. Just a glossy photo of the California coast. On the back, in neat, unmistakable handwriting. For what it's worth, I hope you're doing well. I am, finally. M. No apology. No attempt to reconnect. Just a quiet, cowardly closing note. I threw it in the trash without a second thought. Because healing doesn't require a bow tied by the person who hurt you. It happens when you no longer need one. That night, I closed the clinic early and walked through town. The streets were warm with late sunlight. I passed by the old wellness studio Madeline once ran, now a pottery workshop run by a couple who moved here from Maine. I watched through the window as the woman spun clay with a smile. Music playing, no cameras, no slogans, just art. And it struck me. That's what real creation looks like. Unfilmed, undocumented, quiet. The kind of life Madeline never wanted. The kind I built back, piece by piece. As I walked home, I thought of all the people who reached out in the past year. The ones who'd been manipulated, falsely accused, used, discarded. The ones who whispered their stories like secrets. And I realized that even if I'd never meant to be a voice for anyone, I'd become one anyway. Not because I was loud, but because I never let their lies become my truth. And I never will. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came something I hadn't expected to feel again: ease. Not happiness in the cinematic sense, not some triumphant rebound story. Just ease. I woke up early, drank my coffee on the back porch, walked to the clinic without checking over my shoulder or bracing for another twist in the story Madeline tried to write. There were no twists left, just truth. And it belonged to me now. The town moved on too. People stopped asking questions, stopped whispering. I wasn't the doctor whose young wife tried to ruin him anymore. I was just Dr. Whitlow again. Some patients even said it had made them trust me more because I'd gone through something and didn't crumble. And it was around that time I started mentoring a young woman named Talia. She was in her final year of nursing school, assigned to shadow my clinic for her practical hours. Smart, observant, honest. She reminded me of a younger version of myself, before white coats, before courtrooms, before betrayal. One afternoon, after clinic hours, she lingered by the front desk. "Can I ask you something off the record?" she said. I nodded. "Always. What made you keep going when everything fell apart?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because there were too many. Because stopping would have given her the ending she wanted, I said. And I never let her write the last page. Talia blinked, then smiled. "That's good," she said. "I'll remember that." That summer, we launched a small professional series, short seminars for young healthcare workers on ethics, documentation, and emotional boundaries. It started with 10 attendees. Within 3 months, we were up to 50. The stories they brought in made mine sound tame. One nurse had been accused by a co-worker she had once dated. A physical therapist had been sued by a patient's family member after refusing to falsify records. There was a pattern, a silence, and I knew it all too well. So I used what happened to me not to seek sympathy, but to teach. Still, the past has a strange way of knocking once the air gets quiet. It happened on a Wednesday. I was walking to my car after clinic when I saw her. Madeline, standing by the old library entrance, wearing sunglasses and holding a tote bag. Her hair was longer, her frame thinner, but I'd know her posture anywhere. She didn't approach, didn't wave, just stood there, half-shadowed by a tree, watching. I got in my car and drove off without a word. That night, she messaged me. I'm not here to start anything. I came back to close a few chapters. Just wanted to see if you were okay." Me. "I'm fine. And I don't need anything from you." I know. But I never forgot what I did. Or who I did it to. I stared at the screen for a long while. Then typed. "Me. You didn't destroy me. You freed me from thinking I needed someone like you." And then I blocked the number. Not in anger. In finality. Because people like Madeline don't return to apologize. They return to see if the door is still cracked open. And mine was bolted shut. That night, I took out an old patient journal from my study drawer. The one I used before everything happened. I hadn't written in it since the week her lawyers sent the accusation. I flipped to the next blank page. July 18th. Peace is not the absence of memory. It's the absence of permission. I remember, but I no longer allow it to define me. I closed the book. In the weeks that followed, I heard Madeline had left town again. No drama. No scandal. Just gone. The bookstore owner said she was visiting the coast for a while. I didn't care where, only that it was far. And then, as if the universe had cleared space, new things began. I partnered with a small mental health nonprofit to offer free medical screenings to underserved patients. I was invited to co-author a textbook chapter on professional ethics in rural practice. And I got a letter, a handwritten one, from a man I'd never met, a family doctor in another state. I read about your story, he wrote. I'm going through something similar. I wanted you to know that watching how you handled it, it helped me stay calm when I wanted to burn everything down. I smiled, folded the letter, and placed it gently into the same drawer where I once kept the worst days of my life. Now, the drawer holds balance. Light beside dark. Proof that endings don't have to be bitter to be complete. I never asked for justice. I asked for truth. And once I had it, I didn't need revenge. Because surviving well, with your dignity intact, is the one thing people like Madeline never expect. And never forget. The clinic was quiet that morning. I stood in the break room pouring a second cup of coffee, watching steam rise in the silence. Outside the window, summer had given way to early fall. The dogwoods were starting to blush. The town had slipped into that gentle, golden rhythm it always found in September. School buses humming, sidewalks filling with quiet purpose, and just enough breeze to carry the smell of something familiar. And I was still here, still practicing, still serving, still carrying the name she once tried to taint. No one spoke of Madeline anymore. She had become a footnote in a story she tried to headline. People remembered the scandal. Sure, people always remember a fall. But they remembered my steadiness more. My refusal to shout. My decision to remain calm, organized, methodical. That became the legacy, not the lie. I had started keeping a box in the back office, not with files or records, but letters, emails, notes from colleagues, patients, even strangers. All from people who had seen my story, heard whispers of it, or lived through something similar. Some wrote to say thank you. Others just to say, I thought I was the only one. That box grew every month. Talia, the nursing student I mentored, had since graduated and now worked at a hospital in Atlanta. But she still called from time to time. We talked about the pressure young professionals face, about how no one teaches you what to do when trust turns into threat. You help more people than you think, she said once. But I wasn't counting. I'd already learned that the loudest victories are often the least satisfying. What stayed with me weren't the headlines or the public apologies. It was the look on my patients' faces when they realized I hadn't gone anywhere, that I was still here, still listening, still exactly who I'd always been. That's what Madeline never understood. She built her identity on performance. She needed an audience. She needed affirmation. And when she couldn't get enough, she tried to create it through chaos. But me? I didn't need applause. I needed peace. And I had it now. One rainy afternoon, I received a package. No return label. Inside was a small hardcover journal, bound in leather. Tucked inside the cover was a note. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I'm not asking for anything. I've started over, really started over. I've been working in a hospice as a volunteer. They don't know who I was. They just know who I am now. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. I hope your life is everything I tried to fake and failed to earn. No name, no signature, but I recognized the handwriting. I set the journal down, unopened. She was right about one thing. I didn't want anything. Not an apology, not an update, not a final note. I had everything I needed already. I walked to the cabinet and slid the journal into a drawer. Not with bitterness, with indifference. Because healing doesn't always come in thunder. Sometimes it arrives like that, a closed drawer. A full calendar. A clinic filled with people who trust you. Later that week, I hosted our first evening workshop for new medical grads. I spoke briefly at the start, standing in front of 20 young professionals who still believed every patient would be grateful, every relationship clear. You're going to help a lot of people, I told them. But some people will see your integrity as a tool. They'll use it to build something that benefits them, not you. The room went still. That's not a reason to stop being kind, I added, but it is a reason to write things down. to speak clearly, to defend your name without apology. A hand rose from the back. A young man, maybe 25, asked, "And what if someone tries to ruin you anyway?" I smiled. "Then you show them they built their lies on sand. And you stand where the stone always was." They nodded, took notes, and I realized this was it. Not revenge, not even redemption, just purpose. Madeline had walked into my life with perfect posture and careful words. She had left behind a mess she thought would bury me. But all she did was strip away what didn't matter. And what remained was a man who kept walking forward. Still here, still steady, still Samuel Whitlow. A doctor, a survivor, and no one's scapegoat ever again.